Shiloh. I'm chairman for the Guanana Band of Mission Indians, the Hashima Nation of Orange County, California.
Hi, and I'm Michael Lombardi. I've been involved in Indian gaming and Indian tribal issues in California for the past 18 years.
All right, well listen, we're just as pleased as we can be that you guys are with us today on the cutting edge. I have some serious questions to ask you today. First of all, Damien, could you clarify about your Indian tribe and about what your current status is in the state of California?
We are a state-recognized tribe. We were recognized by the state of California in 1993. We are in the process for federal recognition and have been in that process for well over 20 years.
And now, as we understand, there's 561 authorized Native American tribes in the United States, and you're there's about 147 that are seeking recognition. Is that correct?
About 250.
250 now.
Yeah.
I'll bet after all of this Indian gaming's gone on, right?
A lot of them have been in the process long before Indian gaming ever came about.
Right.
Self-included.
Well, Michael, let me ask you this. Let's go to Michael for a second. One of the things that's just national news all over the place is about Gail Norton, Department of Interior, Bureau of Land Management, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And I know that's such a complex issue, but I think what we need to do is if you can sort of just give us a current uptick on what's going on with that.
Well, there's a lawsuit underway right now, and it's been going on before Gail Norton became the Secretary of the Interior. It started when Bruce Babbitt was the Secretary of the Interior. And a Blackfoot woman named Evelyn Coble finally got tired of never getting her checks in the mail for the grazing that white ranchers were engaged in on her land in Montana. So on behalf of numerous tribal members and tribes throughout the United States, this is over 10 years ago, they filed a lawsuit. And the crux of the lawsuit is asking for an accounting of over $5 billion of trust fund money that the United States government has collected and yet to pay Indians. That lawsuit is going forward. Members of the Republican Party in Congress last month attempted to introduce a bill that would have only allowed the resolution of this issue to go back for 10 years. It was defeated last week in the House of Representatives. And so we're going to have a full accounting going back to 1888 when the Dawes Act was passed. The United States government took trust responsibility for Indian lands. We want to know where the $5 billion is that the United States government owes Native Americans.
One of the things that I was going to mention about that is that the Department of Interior shut down the website. What was that about?
Well, what happened was that Judge Lambert, who's prosecuting the case one night, got onto the computer and found out that he was able to surf through the Interior Department's website and get to individual trust accounts and manipulate the figures in those trust accounts. So he ordered the Secretary of Interior to shut that aspect of the Department of Interior's website down. But what Gail Norton did, and we believe she did it in order to generate political support for the Department of Interior's do-nothing attitude, she shut the entire Department of Interior's website down. So the fact that the Department of Interior's website has been down is not a result of the Cobalt decision, it's a result of one more heavy-handed tactic by the Secretary of the Interior.
Well, for non-Indians and for people around the country that support Indians generally, the concern that they're looking at is that maybe there's a lot more than the $5 billion, as you mentioned, that's been missing because of this.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows how much money is owed to Indians, but it's in the billions, and this has been going on since 1888.
All right, let's bring it up to 2002 right now. Bureau of Indian Affairs. Let's switch gears here just real quickly. The Bureau of Indian Affairs is responsible for the upkeep of the tribes, or for the, I guess you would say,
managing the trust responsibilities that the United States government has to Native American tribal government.
Right. Now let's get from that, and now the Bureau of Land Management is a separate entity, is it not?
That is correct.
So, if they don't have accountability at Bureau of Land Management...
No, because the land that we're talking about, while managed by the Bureau of Land Management, is held in trust by the Department of Interior. You want to comment on that? No, that land You know, your viewers would be interested to know that the little bits of Indian land that remain to this day, that Indian people that live on it cannot make money on that land, cannot lease that land out, cannot build on that land without the Great White Father's permission from Washington, D.C. And it's because of that trust responsibility that the federal government has, that they have an obligation to make a full accounting of where all that money is, whether the Bureau of Land Management was leasing the land out to ranchers, allowing for mineral exploitation, or cutting of timber. It is still the Department of Interior, the Bureau of Indian Affairs responsibility to make a full accounting of where all of that Indian money is.
All right, let's ask one serious question that's not been broached anywhere that I know of. The old days of the American Indian used to be they used to have a bad Indian agent, as they used to say. They used to have the evil Indian agent. You've seen it all done in all the movies on television of the bad Indian agent that misappropriated the funds of the Indians, their medicines, took all of their food and their whatever, and did away with it. Is there still godlike powers by each one of the Indian agents that are in charge of the tribes?
Well, that's a very complex question. The Indian agents that you refer to existed during a period of time when Indian Affairs was under the Department of War. It would not be until the 1930s with the passage of the Indian Reorganization Act that the Bureau of Indian Affairs would be created, and finally Native Americans would no longer be under the authority of the United States military.
All right, so you're saying that the current Indian agents are just government bureaucrats working for the Bureau of Indian Affairs?
And well, one more. Let's take it one step further. Is that with the Indian Reorganization Act, the United States Congress has finally mandated that the executive branch recognize and respect and work on a government-to-government basis with the Indian tribal councils and tribal governments that existed on those lands.
This is a lot of complexity, Michael, and let me explain where we want to go with this. What's the corrective action now for Gail Norton, for Bureau of Land Management, for Bureau of Indian Affairs? What should be happening at this moment? I mean, they're talking about years before the accountability of those trust funds are delineated.
Well, let's go back to you asked Chairman Shiloh earlier about all the tribes that are seeking federal recognition. Your viewers would be interested to know that in 1961, the great liberal president, John Kennedy, by the stroke of a pen, signed the Indian Termination Act. With a stroke of a pen, without any judicial review or right of appeal, 25% of all the federally recognized tribes in the United States were eliminated, were terminated. 67 of them were in California. So there is a movement across the country for those tribes to regain the recognition that they rightfully held. Now in 1970, President Nixon changed the entire course of Indian policy on the part of the federal government by adopting the policy of self-determination. What we want the Secretary of the Interior to do and President Bush to do is to respect the right of tribal governments in their pursuit of self-determination and self-sufficiency to allow us to run our affairs on our own reservations as the independent, inherently self-sovereign nations that we have been before the founding of the Republic of the United States of America.
Damian Shiloh, let's bring it back to you now. How has this affected you directly? In other words, when did your Indian tribe become approved by the state of California?
Well, we're recognized by the state of California in 1993. We're going even further back. I mean, we have written documentation that takes us back to 1776 with the founding of the Mission San Juan Capistrano.
All right, let's be honest about this. How many members are in your tribe?
I have under my leadership a little over 2,500 enrolled. 2,500.
All right. So what is your process to go forward to be recognized by the government of the United States?
With the recognition process, it's a matter of documentation of our history, showing that we've maintained our community and our culture throughout time and still have a government over ourselves. We've had to reorganize to try to meet this criteria to help them understand their idea of a true government as opposed to family leaders and the clan leadership that we've had historically.
All right, the naysayers are going to say you're just trying to get out of paying taxes. If you are, let's bring it down to what happens to your tribal members right now. Do you have to pay state taxes?
Yes, we still pay our state taxes.
Do you have to pay
taxes.
federal taxes?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. If you were recognized as a tribe, would you have to pay taxes?
Then we have the ability to obtain tribal lands, to get lands in trust, which would help protect us with that. But no, they still end up paying the state and federal taxes.
All right. Well, let's go back.
We could just, for a moment, the naysayers, let's call them what they are. Let's call them the bigots, okay? Does the city of Los Angeles pay taxes on revenues that they generate? Does the county of Los Angeles or the county of San Diego? Does the city of New York pay taxes? Heck no, because they're governments. These tribes are governments. They were inherently self-governing entities before the United States government. Their source of political power does not flow from the Constitution of the United States or from the United States government. Why should an entity that is a government be forced to pay taxes to another government?
Let me ask you, Michael, this is a good philosophical question. I don't know where you're going to go with this, but I really would like to know this. You know, there's, what did we say, 561 tribes that are recognized currently in the United States.
Left in the United States.
Right, and then we have
there
about
were a lot more before. I wonder what happened to them.
Understood, but let's say there's 250 more now that are seeking to be recognized by the federal government. Wouldn't it make sense to have those members of those tribes join other tribes and therefore just become under the umbrella of one of the 561?
That makes no more sense than solving the problem in the Middle East by moving everybody from Israel to New York. Why don't we just move all the Jews to New York? Or why don't we move all the Palestinians to Egypt? Because they are sovereign people with a sovereign government and sovereign land. These individuals, these tribes were here before the United States was formed. If the United States of America is going to keep its word and be the leader of the free world and the advocate of human rights, isn't it time that they begin to keep their word to the first inhabitants of this land?
Understood. Now wait, let's go back here a minute. Just 1 second. When did they first start this recognized or unrecognized tribal system? In other words, was this going on from the beginning of time, by the time of,
let's get something straight. Most of the tribes that you're talking about were recognized. They're attempting to be re-recognized because they were illegally terminated. That's why one court after another has ruled that the United States government has an obligation to re-recognize them, and that the fashion in which they have been terminated was illegal.
So you're saying that the Kennedy decision back in the 60s is the one that turned the tail on this whole thing?
Let's be frank about it. The reason that John Kennedy signed the Indian Termination Act was because of massive lobbying from the states, particularly the state of California, that wanted to exterminate, to remove, to eliminate, to erase for all time from the face of their respective states the presence of self-governing, sovereign Indian tribes within their nation. It's a new form of genocide. Maybe they're not out killing people with guns, but they're eliminating them as a distinct, unique people who have been living on these lands since time immemorial.
All right, let's go back to Damien here for a minute. Talk about your language, if you will. Let's make it a little more interesting. You've got a language of your Indian tribe. What do you call that language?
The Hashman language.
All right, and now is it similar to other Indian tribal languages?
Yes, we were the Southern California area. We were able to communicate with a lot of our sister tribes. It was just a variation of dialect.
And so, in this day and age, do your children learn these tribal languages?
I am still trying to teach my 3-year-old the language, and she's actually helping me relearn the language. A language was lost, and it's only been a couple generations. My grandfather, his first language was a Hashman. His second was Spanish. Thirdly, he learned English, and they enforced on us to only learn English to try to assimilate us into the society, to not be looked down upon. As you look at my grandparents, also were raised at the time. Their parents taught them to be fearful of being Indian because there was bounties that they remembered, and were taught not to claim the Indian heritage and shy away from it. So the language kind of faded away, but we're trying to revive that and bring it back.
One of the things I was going to ask you is, how much support do you, as an unrecognized tribe, federally that is only, but as an unrecognized tribe, how much favor are you currying with other Indian tribes that are recognized, that are attempting to help you in any way? Do you get any help from anybody else?
We have gotten support from our sister tribes that we actually have relatives on that are very close relatives, as close as first cousins that sit on the tribal council, so we've gotten support there. Our tribe has also gotten support from the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association, which represents 19 or 20 of the federally recognized tribes in Southern California.
All right.
They are in full support of us getting federal recognition.
If I might add one thing, there is, of the 109 federally recognized tribes in California, not one tribe is opposing the Juaneño Band of Hashaman, the Senu people, from being recognized. The only opposition that Damon's tribe is encountering is from non-Indians. Not one tribe in the state of California is opposing their re-recognition.
All right, let's go to this. Let's go to the other side of this coin too. I'm asking you to think kind of out of the box here. People are saying, okay, we passed that law. What was the law that was passed, Damien, that ensured Indian gaming in California?
Michael.
Well, it was in March of 2000. Over 4 million Californians, 69% of the voters that voted in that election passed Proposition 1A. Proposition 1A was a constitutional amendment that does two things. It requires that the state of California recognize tribal governments and deal with them on a respectful government-to-government basis, and it permits casino gambling exclusively in California on Indian lands.
All right, now listen, here's what everyone is saying now. There are some, as with all good things, sometimes there are unintended consequences. And one of the unintended consequences that certain people are running into, for example, let's use the Palm Springs example. They started a casino nearby, and then they bought some land down in downtown Palm Springs, the tribe did, and now they're opening casinos in downtown Palm Springs. And we didn't, and city governments are being affected by this dramatically. They're getting flack from both sides. Some say they want it because it's better for the taxes, and the other ones say no, we shouldn't have that sort of thing in our community. So I guess the question to you is both. If you can look at it and say, what do you think that current tribes have applied their casino privileges too much?
Well, let me first of all correct you. Everybody isn't saying that. Numerous polls that we have shown show that 75% of the eligible likely voters in California support Indian gaming today. We're right here at the Pechanga Resort Casino. The Californian people are voting with their feet. It is a very small number of people that are raising the issues that you've asked. In terms of the Palm Springs Agua Caliente ban, they didn't buy any land in downtown Palm Springs. In 1888, the President of the United States signed a treaty that granted to them half of the acreage of the city of Palm Springs. They actually took half of the acreage away and gave it to the railroads. So you need to correct your history. The white people that live in Palm Springs are living on land that they took from the Indians. The Agua Caliente band operates a casino at the Spa Resort and Casino, which has been Indian land before Moses led the Jews out of Israel.
All right,
they actually have two casinos. One is in Rancho Mirage, land that they have also held in trust since 1889 for the tribe.
Okay, Damien, let's go back to your tribe now. Let's say that name again. I am having a tough time saying that.
It's the Juaneño Band of Mission Indians, a Hashaman Nation.
Hashaman Nation, all right. Should you, at this point in time, as a California recognized tribe, if you were to find land that was tribal land, could you create a casino in California?
Not without the federal recognition to get the land in trust federally. If that was to happen upon our recognition, then yes, we could at that point.
All right. Now, so what you're doing is you're sort of waiting and hold until you get the federal recognition.
That's correct.
All right. Now let's go back to something that's more important that everyone in America knows about, and this is more on Michael's idea. There's a lot of very poor Indians in the United States. Very poor Indians. Some of them are starving. Some of them don't have enough clothes. They don't have heaters. They don't have anything. And those are the ones that are on different tribes that maybe don't have Indian gaming. What would you say about that particular part of it? Do you believe that the tribes that are benefiting from gambling should share some of that wealth with their other tribal members.
Well, in California, we're doing exactly that. In California, one of the unique aspects of our compact is the revenue sharing trust fund. And thus far, in the first 2 years of the compact, California tribes, gaming tribes, have paid over $50 million to the state of California to distribute to non-gaming tribes. Unfortunately, the state has only found a way to distribute half of that money thus far. But in California, tribes like the Pechanga band are contributing a significant amount of money consistent with the compact here in California to tribes that don't have gaming.
All right.
I don't think Indian gaming was ever envisioned as solving the problems that the United States government created by failing to fulfill their trust obligations to Indians. Indian gaming is not intended to replace money and support that the federal government has an obligation under
through treaty,
federal
right?
law
Through
and treaty rights.
Right.
The reason they're starving Indians in the United States is not because Indian tribes with casinos aren't helping out. It's because the United States of America has failed to keep its word to American Indians.
All right, listen, there are some tribes that would suggest to us, the cutting edge, that many of the tribes that are doing Indian gaming now are just 10 or 12 people that get together, and that they are very susceptible to organized crime and to crime from the Las Vegas gambling interest. What would you say about that? Do you think that exists or doesn't?
Well, I think Indian gaming is probably less corrupt than major American corporations that trade stock on the New York Stock Exchange. And to that end, there have been 3 hearings in the last 8 years in the United States Congress on this subject. And in all 3 hearings, the Justice Department has testified at those hearings that there is no evidence, let me repeat for a 3rd time, no evidence that organized crime has ever infiltrated an Indian tribe that operated a casino. These are stories that you might read in the Boston Globe or the Wall Street Journal that have an anti-Indian attitude. There is not one shred, not one scintilla of credible evidence that organized crime has ever infiltrated an Indian casino, according to the United States Justice Department.
Great. Damien, you in the newspaper article that we read about you, you said that Indian gaming might increase tax revenues to local communities, the equivalent of 6 Costco's. Is that, do you still feel that way?
Oh yes, the outlying communities always are affected by it. You look at how they bring in use of all the different facilities. They'll use the outlying businesses and generate a lot of revenue. And they also give back to the local communities in forms of donations to a lot of different nonprofit groups. They've provided very well for the city of Temecula here. They made it real clear, even at a city council meeting that I recall, that they said, well, here's all the people all the businesses that we use. We could take our business somewhere else. And here's all the community services that we donate to. And we can stop that if that's how Temecula truly feels about the Indians, and we can just start our own and be self-sufficient. And it made them back up and say, hey, that's a tremendous amount of revenue that they're bringing in.
All right.
And the tribes are genuinely concerned with that local community aspect too, because they are part of it in the same. I did want to reference back a little bit to the point we were talking about the monies that come back to the tribes. As it's given out to the tribes, that is the federally recognized tribes. So unrecognized tribes, like we do not receive any of that state money.
Well, a couple of questions here. First one is that based on the old treaties, I guess it was in the 40s and 50s, each tribal member got $150 a month. I think it was something like that across the board for their tribes. And but they were not taught any skills. They were not taught even English on their tribal lands. And even though we have had that discussion earlier about the loss of the Indian language, there's right now there's about 85%, I guess, that of people of Indian nature, Native Americans, that still only speak their tribal land or speak their tribal language or Spanish or something else, but not English. Is that correct?
No, I don't think that's accurate at all. I think you're going to find that almost all Native American people in the United States speak English.
So you'd fight that they don't.
I don't think, but most of them are the products of Indian schools that were designed to eliminate their tribal culture.
Okay.
Part of the Assimilation Act that was passed back before the Second World War, Damon was referring to it earlier. If you talk to our elders, and despite what people think, Indian languages are still spoken in California. But my mother-in-law, a member of the Torres Martinez band, likes to tell a story about a Catholic school in Banning where all the Indians were sent, that when they spoke Indian, they'd beat them with rods. The nuns would beat them with rods. Before the current Catholic Church abuse scandal occurred, Indians were receiving welts on their hands from the Catholic nuns that were beating their Indian language out of them. And as Damon was saying, that's one of the reasons that you find so few Indian people today speaking their native languages here. There is a concerted effort throughout California and the United States to reinvigorate and to save these languages, however. But almost all Indians in the United States speak English and are fairly well integrated into the fabric of American society. Matter of fact, your viewers would be interested to know that although Indians constitute less than 2% of the population of the United States, we account for almost 10% of the American servicemen killed in action in all of our nation's wars.
Oh, we know that. And you know, one of the things that I might bring up is about the fact that are Indians allowed to vote? I mean, that sounds silly to ask.
No,
but
you know, that's a really good question, because actually women got the right to vote before Indians did. It would not be until 1934, I believe it was, with the passage of the Indian Reorganization Act, that Indians were made citizens.
So they weren't able to vote until 1934.
They were denied the suffrage right. Women, thank God, women have the right to vote. But women had the right to vote before American Indians had the right to vote.
All right,
Indians do vote today and are obviously actively involved in the politics of the state of California and our nation.
I'm going to go back to one issue that I think is extremely important, and that is on poverty, Indian poverty. And if you can, either one of you, take that issue up and say what you think the corrective action should be, other than you know, I don't know. Just let me hear what you have to say about it.
Many Indian communities throughout the United States, their members live in abject poverty. This is a result of the policies for the last 100 years of the federal government. If there are any people in the United States that demonstrates that welfare doesn't work, it's Indians. Your viewers would be interested to know that in trying to help Indians, instead of letting them do on their own, that tuberculosis was the major health problem in Indian country before the Second World War, and diabetes was virtually unknown. There were almost no Indians that had diabetes recorded before the Second World War. Today, diabetes is an epidemic in Indian country because of the government surplus agricultural products program. We call it commodities. After the Second World War, the United States government started taking all the surplus cheese and powdered milk, etc., and giving it to Indians. And as a result today, obesity and diabetes is an epidemic in Indian country because of the welfare mentality that has been pounded in Indians. What we need to do is free Indians from welfare and allow them to use their own energies and their own lands by allowing them to develop their own properties without interference from the state or the federal government.
All right, one of the things also is alcoholism that you haven't mentioned, because that's whether that's an old wives' tale or a reality. We'd like to kind of know about Indian alcoholism. Is that a strong factor?
Well, of course, alcoholism and drug abuse is in every community throughout the United States. There probably isn't a viewer listening to this show that doesn't have somebody in their family that's not an alcoholic. It is not a stereotype to say that alcoholism has been a scourge on our communities. It certainly has. Alcoholism has destroyed many Indian lives. When you have hopelessness and nothing to look forward to and no jobs on some of these communities, many of our people do end up having nothing else to do but drink.
Okay, Damien, let me ask you this, and it's a tough one. But you know, a lot of tribes have good chiefs, and a lot of tribes have bad chiefs, and a lot of tribes have chiefs that don't care. Each one of the tribes is very much like everywhere else in America. So tell me, what do you think of how does the Achaman Nation join hands with other tribes that they think are good, or how does that all work? We don't know that.
Well, it's true. It's you're always going to have the people that are influenced, and they always say that you give somebody a little bit of power, and you'll see the true person of what they do with it. and a lot of my philosophy that I've been taught, again, from my parents and grandparents and the other tribal leaders that I've seen that I very highly respect, is that philosophy that I'm not working for me, I'm working for my future generations. My daughter's children and their children to come is who I need to be working for, not for myself. And giving of that and keeping in mind that it has to be for everybody is who I'm looking for. It gives me a different light to do that. As I became chairman, I was told a little story that it's going to be harder than being president of the United States. I kind of laughed and chuckled, but 2 months later I came back and explained to this elder that I understood what he meant then. And the difference in a politician, I can go town to town and tell people what they want to hear, trying to get their votes and everything. As a tribal leader, I am the leader of my family.
Let me ask you, let's go there for a minute. Are tribal leaders, the chief or the chairman in this particular case, are you are you elected from your own community, or how does that all happen?
Yes, I am. Different tribes handle it differently. It's either a lineal descendancy that you step into. Most have turned in more of a parliamentary type of government to where it's an elected position, which mine is, for a position of 4 years at a time.
Before the French Revolution or democracy came to Europe, before the American Revolution and democracy in this country, California Indians were practicing a town hall form of democracy, where every adult member of the tribe had an opportunity to have a say in council meetings. Their leaders were elected. California, before the coming of the Spaniards, was an intense zone of economic activity and the exercise of democratic principles in the operation of government. So you'll also be interested to know, there's an interesting book out called Our Lost Founding Fathers by a writer named Johannesson. It documents that actually Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson copied the Iroquois' great law of peace. The Iroquois Confederation is the model for our current form of federal government, not the Greeks. The Europeans who came here copied the Iroquois Confederation, which was a great confederation of 6 tribes that had an executive branch, a judicial branch, and a legislative branch.
I remember that from school. That's what
our democratic principles are taken from Native Americans, although they're inspired by the Greeks. We didn't copy the Greeks, we copied the Oneidas, the Senecas, the Tuscaroras, the Mohawks, that were all part of that great Iroquois Confederation. Democracy has been practiced in California before there was the United States.
Michael, let me ask you something now. This is important about intertribal rivalries. You know, you've got the Navajo Nation, you've got Cherokees, you've got Sioux. These are giant confederations of Indians, and then you have the smaller tribes. So, tell us about that part of the function? Is it do you have some intertribal rivalries and turf battles?
If it hadn't been for tribal rivalries, Indians would probably still own this continent. It was, as a result, a long history of white people playing Indian rivalries off against one another. The Mohawks fought the Oneidas in the Revolutionary War. The Mohawks fought the Hurons in the French and Indian Wars. When they went to get Geronimo up in Mexico, they sent Apache police to arrest him. Yes, white people have used Indians to fight each other for 400 years. When George Armstrong Custer went looking for Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, he used crows to lead them to their camp. And I will not deny that there aren't rivalries or hostilities or animosities in intertribal relations today, but the National Congress of American Indians, the National Indian Gaming Association, are organizations that are working very hard to facilitate communication and joint action on the part of Indian tribes. Probably, somebody's breaking into your car, brother. Probably at no time in history has there been more unity and more joint action on the political level among Native American tribes in the United States in this period right now today. As you see a renaissance, a reinvigoration of Indian country, Indian languages, and Indian culture, and a new appreciation by non-Indians for the contributions the Indians have made. This is actually maybe the golden age of Indian people.
All right, let's go back. We've made full circle now. Let's go back to Gail Norton and Bureau of Land Management and the trust debate and so on. Which tribes are taking the lead in challenging what's going on there and for the accountability? And has there been any accountability since January 1 for anything in the Bureau of Land Management?
None. And the Secretary of the Interior stands in contempt of court, in contempt of a federal court for their refusal to make a full accounting. The COBOL lawsuit is being prosecuted by individual Indian people.
You have a support group of tribes that are...
The National Congress of American Indians are supporting their endeavor, but these are individual Indian people being represented by a number of lawyers that are prosecuting this. But you can bet across this country that every single federally recognized Indian tribe in the United States is rooting for Ms. COBOL to be successful.
All right,
in many cases, some of the money owed is also owed to tribal governments in addition to individuals.
I understand that, but don't you think it a bit unfair to ask Gail Norton to reaccount for things for how many previous administrations since 1880 to come up with an accounting from Bureau of Lands Management suddenly?
Well, somebody collected that money. Somebody collected that money. Somebody spent that money. We spent $40 million trying to find out what President Clinton did with his $40,000 investment in Whitewater. We think that a complete accounting of $5 billion of Indian money is only just.
All right. Well, listen, I want to thank both of you so much for the time you spent with us on the Cutting Edge. Is there any last words you want to come up with, Damien, about Indian affairs in California particularly, or in the nation?
Well, just the same thing. We're still trying to draw attention to ourselves in our fight for federal recognition, and trying to get the support and attention to not just ourselves, but the other tribes within California that are due this recognition. And we need the politicians to stand up and say, this is wrong, that it taking 25 to 30 years to go through a process for recognition is ridiculous. They're processing less than one a year. If you're number 250 on the list, it won't be in your lifetime or your children's lifetime. You're looking at 300-400 years projected before you're recognized, and that's purely wrong. It's still the federal government just delaying and trying to outlast everybody.
Damien Shiloh, Michael Lombardi. The American Indian movement is safe and well with you guys at the helm there. Keep doing what you do. Thank you so much for joining us on the Cutting Edge. Hey now, man. You guys are awesome.
They took the whole Cherokee Nation, put us on this reservation, took away our way of life. The tomahawk and the bow and the knife. They put our papoose in a crib, took the buckskin from our ribs, took away our way of life. The tomahawk and the bow and the knife took away our native tongue and taught the English to our young. Hunya, hunya, hey, hunya, hunya, he. Now that's Cherokee for Andrew Jackson was some kind of great big SOB. Hunya, 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 yip, yip, hunya, 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 ooh, hunya, hunya, hey. The old teepee we all love so, we're using now for just a show. And all the beads we made by hand are nowadays made in Japan. Though I wear a white man's tie, I'll be a red man till the day die.